Now we're recording in two places.
Now we're recording in two places.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody, it's Radio Free Rotona. I think this is 46, maybe 45. I don't know.
Nobody cares.
I don't have my little book here to keep track in. I care. And at least 1/3 of this podcast, so that's 30% of the people.
Okay. Fair enough. 36% of the production team cares.
Exactly. Protect minority
That's
rights.
a substantial minority.
You got to protect minority interests.
Can't ignore that.
Anyway, today we're talking about. Sorry.
What?
I'd say 100% of the production team.
Well, I guess. Yeah. Fair enough.
Today we're talking Trump.
And all things Trump.
All things Trump. How Trump pertains to the ceasefire in Israel.
The liberal leadership race,
potential negotiations between Putin and the Ukrainians, and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully lower oil prices.
Yeah. So preamble that we were talking about off air, just because it's kind of where we were. So I'll try and summarize for 30 seconds here. Trent, time me. 5 days ago, Trump made a press conference. 5 days ago. Trump made a press conference where he specifically mentioned the Russians and how the war in Ukraine was not going well, how they needed to make some changes, probably changes they didn't want to make, but that they really didn't have any choice in, and that how his plans were for dropping the floor price on global oil, and how this would drastically impact the Russian economy and make it impossible for them to prosecute the war. So they had better come to the table because they don't have any option. The war's going to end whether they want it to end or not. So they had better come to the table and at least maybe, try and cut some kind of deal before the rug gets pulled out from under them. The very next day, Putin basically addresses these comments in a long interview with Russian television, where he says that's not a good idea for the United States. It's not a good idea for the American oil industry. It makes it impossible for entrepreneurs they have no cost certainty, so it discourages investment. So he was basically trying to talk the Americans out of doing that. And given that the day before Trump's conference, Putin had given kind of a State of the Union address where he was really pumping the tires of the Russian economy, which global analysts, at least the ones that I read, interpreted that as serious danger signs in the Russian economy, which have been observed around the world. Specifically, 21% interest rate set by the central bank, inflation, double-digit inflation, which is not bowing to this
high interest rates.
To the high interest rates, a shortage of skilled labor. The defense industry, the near exhaustion of Soviet stocks of Soviet equipment going in the war. And the latest stat that I saw that was given to us in our monthly briefing was that the debt load of the Russian defense industrial base is 70% of total worth. In that the Russian government is paying its arms manufacturers basically 2021 rates when their costs are a 2025 sanctions environment. And that the Russian defense industry has basically been running on debt in the belief that victory is just around the corner.
Yeah.
That, we can float this, we'll leverage it, we're going to win any week now, but it never happens. And so that the Russian economy is maybe a few months away from collapse.
Right.
Things are not going well. And then along comes old Donald J. saying, I'm going to collapse the world oil price, which is the only source of revenue Russia has. And so then we could be talking about a Russian collapse in a matter of weeks instead of months. And that's basically where we said, hey, we should record this.
Yeah.
Trent.
So,
I give you the floor.
I heard you say, did you say 30 seconds?
Yeah, I tried.
Did you said,
how close did I come?
It was pretty good for like 3 minutes.
You failed.
Oh, man.
It was a pretty good synopsis for 3 minutes.
Just past 3
minutes. Was it 3?
So.
Oh, my God. So much for that. Jeez.
It was almost 3.
Oh, my God. I hang my
Okay,
head
well,
in
I
shame.
have to say, when you said 30
Well,
seconds,
no,
I thought it
you
was,
set yourself
I thought it was pretty ambitious.
I suppose, yeah.
an unachievable goal.
It was optimistic.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I hand the floor to you guys.
I agree with Steve. I think you did a great job.
What are you guys'
All
thoughts
things
with it?
considered. Well, I mean, I think you're right. That's exactly where it's sitting at. I've read 2 or 3 articles this week where it points out just that. That the Russian economy is at best going to collapse at the end of the year, probably sooner, and that's without any discussion of lowering oil prices.
Yeah.
Everything you said there. I haven't seen anything about the military stocks and what they're having to draw on in particular.
There's a
The
great
point-
a great channel that you can check out called Covert Cabal.
Yes.
He's one of the biggest. Perun uses him as one of his
Yep.
sources for
And
visual.
yeah, just for audience reference, Covert Cabal teams up with 2 other sources named Jompy and HIMARS.
Yeah.
And they purchase the very latest in satellite imagery.
Yeah, of Russian armored vehicle parks.
And they've developed an AI algorithm that helps them interpret that. It's like they're not eyeballing it. They've got an AI algorithm that the 3 of them have collaborated on to give them some probably the most, basically like Oryx uses them.
Yeah.
And they're a pretty reputable organization. So they're probably the most accurate non-governmental source on, which is, wow, what a remarkable, if you needed anything that summed up warfare in the digital age, that's it. Like the importance of open source intelligence.
Yeah.
But those guys have, according to their numbers, they are going to be out of tube artillery. Like they're already consumed self-propelled artillery.
Yeah.
They are going to be out of towed artillery by August of 2025. They are going to be out of main battle tanks by July of 2025. And they will have consumed all infantry fighting vehicles by June 2025. Like the Soviet stocks.
Yeah.
Oh, and in our briefing, there are 2 lathes in Russia that can rebarrel artillery pieces and tank guns.
2.
2. One of them is down.
Of course.
And the only place in the world that makes the parts to repair it are in Sweden. And the Swedes are not willing to do business with them.
I bet.
So the Russians have 1 lathe. Now it's working 24/7
Yeah, until it breaks.
until it breaks.
Because it's not meant to work 24/7.
It's not meant to do that. Yeah. They have no way to repair it
I mean,
when it goes down.
Sorry, we cut you off.
pursuant. No, it's all good. I mean, these conversations go where they go. But to Putin's response regarding this isn't actually in the interests of the oil companies. That's something I've also seen. That's the one question mark for going this route to bring down the prices. It isn't good for the big oil companies. Isn't good for their investors and their shareholders, because their profits are going to go down. So
It depends on how you look at it, though. What they might not make in a per barrel price, they could make up in volume.
Yeah. Yeah.
So instead of let's make $80 per barrel profit, let's make $15 per barrel, but we'll sell 7 more barrels. So maybe that's the angle that they're taking, which could explain why they want to squeeze Canadian oil production. They want to reduce imports and say to the American oil companies, you go with me on lowering the oil price, and I will protect you from foreign competition.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I don't know. I'd fly really with American oil companies. They're all pretty heavily invested around the world.
Well, yeah, and I suppose you could also say the Canadian oil patch,
and in the Canadian oil sector as well, right? Like,
and also the refinery complex in Texarkana is kind of geared to heavy oil.
well, there's a bunch of there's some along the Gulf Coast as well that are specifically geared or set up for Western Canada Select. So that doesn't switch over for free.
Yeah,
right. So,
but on the whole, the other thing is Trump is not beholden to the oil patch. He's not.
No, he's not beholden.
Yeah, he's his support base. Yeah, oil tends to support him.
Yeah.
But he has a much broader political base. Unlike say Alberta provincial politics, where oil is the kingmaker, right?
Sure, but Trump is going to get punished right away if oil prices go up.
Oh yeah,
right.
But he won't get punished right away if oil prices collapse.
No, people will be happy if oil prices go.
Yeah, he stands to gain. Now, of course, the individual oil companies wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
But the broader, like he stands to gain in a broad sense.
And as long as they don't like knock it down below probably like 60 to $65 a barrel, the oil companies would be fine.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where they feel where their volume is probably best.
Oh, yeah.
But
especially the shale oil guys.
And this is where we have our first crossover into Canadian politics, with Danielle Smith, not jumping on board the bandwagon in terms of a cohesive message back from, Canadian premiers across the board, because we've obviously got, in Alberta,
it's also this cohesive message.
The energy sector
has differential impact, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not talking about, hey, let's stop electricity exports from Ontario and Quebec. That's not on the table.
Yeah.
They say, oh no, let's just stop Alberta exports.
Well, again,
yeah.
So it's like the national interest is
once again,
Quebec and Ontario interest.
Once again, it's this paradox that Canada seems to have with Alberta, the oil sands, as the linchpin of the economy, but leveraging it in every possible way at all times, without the interests of Alberta itself in mind.
Yeah.
It's
like the only provinces that need to take a hit for Team Canada are the ones that don't start with the words Ontario or Quebec.
Yeah.
Everybody else got to take one for the team.
Yeah.
But those two are special. They don't. That's kind of
so. It remains to be seen what's going to happen. I even had a conversation with a supplier on, I think it was Friday, and they're in here, and they want us to use their equipment, and they're basically saying everyone in the province and probably the country is waiting for February 1st.
Yes. Yep.
And
they want to see what happens
to them. So we're in this great big holding pattern. So Alberta, again, is going to be the tip of the spear on that. What does this mean for us?
Yeah. And I imagine Ontario's really concerned because at least Alberta there's a good chance that energy will not be tariffed.
Yeah.
There's a good chance.
Daniel Smith has taken a very different tack from basically everybody else in the country as far as engagement with the Trump administration, right?
Yes.
Like she was down in DC for like 5 days preceding the inauguration, glad handing, and she went to Mar-a-Lago a little while ago, right? And like almost nobody has. Rob Ford's over like in Ontario. He's like, gird your loins.
Yeah.
Rob Ford's just called an election.
Yeah.
Because he says he needs a mandate.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He's on. They just announced it on Friday.
Oh, wow.
Thursday, I think he said he was going to go to the lieutenant governor in the morning.
Was 2025 his election year anyway?
No, 2026.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So he's really going early.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just because he says he needs a mandate to do the battle, right?
Right.
Like, he's got his Canada's not for sale hat. And
Ontario has really got a lot to lose here.
Yeah.
Specifically in the auto sector.
Yes.
And like not just making cars, but parts for cars.
Parts is the big one. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ontario's manufacturing is already teetering on the brink.
Yeah.
Just because of their high energy prices. Or high electricity prices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
if they get tariffed, they're done.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing is that the auto sector on both sides of the border is so integrated, the one with the other, that tariffs don't make any sense. You got Americans making parts for Canadian factories.
Yeah.
You got
absolutely
Canadians making parts for American factories, right?
I think, I would agree with you as a conservative. I would say to you that tariffs make no sense anywhere. Like as Daniel Hannan says, if your neighbor fills his harbors with rocks, why would you fill your harbors with rocks, right?
Yeah,
But
I've been likening it to it's a war where you inflict all the wounds on the adversaries inflict wounds on
on each other,
themselves.
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, I'll show you, and you shoot yourself in the foot, and then he says, "No, I'll show you more," and he shoots himself in the knee.
Yeah.
Just like,
But in this kind of imbalance of like a 10-to-1 economic size,
yeah,
I think Trump is willing to, like, his kind of obsession is bring the supply chains home. Like he's kind of into like a very autarkic economic system
yeah,
where he doesn't want any other country to have any influence on the United States whatsoever. And so he wants to bring all of those supply chains back under American jurisdiction.
yeah.
And I kind of wonder if maybe that's a part of his trolling about Canada unifying with the United States. That what he's saying is, if you want to trade with me, I want those parts of your economy under American jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So I don't need you to actually join America,
Yeah.
but I want some serious regulatory authority in your country.
I was joking with some other friends of mine the other day about how, like, when Trump's talking about Canada as the 51st state, right? Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's usually like his craziest things are usually his opening negotiating position.
Yes.
So he's just happy if Alberta becomes the 51st state.
and yeah, like as Victor Hansen has said many times, like, this is his MO. You start with wild and crazy provocative statements that gets your counterpart completely in a tizzy, off their game.
Yep.
And so then when you come in with when you when you allow them to talk you down from the crazy hill down to what was always your moderate position, or what was always your real position, but which is far more moderate in comparison to the crazy, they think they've
I'd like
won.
to thank you for tempering that statement.
What's that?
Yeah. That you were saying your moderate position, and then you corrected it to
it's not moderate. It's what he wanted in the first
relative
place
to the original starting.
But it's moderate compared to the crazy, or at least your counterpart thinks it's moderate. But no, that's what you wanted right from the get-go.
Yeah, it's just everything's relative. Yeah.
And if you had opened with that, they would have taken huge offense, thinking like, "Whoa, like, we're giving up everything, we're getting nothing.
Yeah.
What the hell?" But then you come up with, "Well, I want to take over your whole goddamn country." And they're like, "Oh my God." And then when you just come back and say, "Okay, your auto industry comes under my regulatory authority."
Yeah.
Which they're all of a sudden they're like, "Well, at least we get to keep our country." Like, I am greatly exaggerating for the sake of illustration.
Yeah.
But I kind of think that's his MO. And then once he gets the deal, he praises you to the nines, like he did with North Korea.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, Kim's great guy." When before he was calling him Rocket Man, and now he was going to, "You want a bomb? Fine. You want a nuclear war? Let's get into a nuclear war. I'll annihilate you," and all this blah, 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 blah. By humiliating, belittling him. Then after the negotiations, Kim basically gives him what he wants, and then says, "Oh yeah, Kim's a great guy. What an awesome dude," right?
Yeah.
So I definitely think there is a real and tangible goal behind this trolling, but I don't know what it is.
This is just kind of just popped in my head, but I'm kind of wondering. I wanted to go like, what do you guys think of the tack that Poilievre has been taking? But I'm also kind of wondering if Trump is doing his own little outside election interference, because he's been very hard. He's been very mean, I guess, for lack of a better term, to Chrystia Freeland. And it seems like Poilievre is his preferred candidate. I think the administration has made it. I think comments that Danielle Smith had made after talking about
they would definitely prefer to have like-minded people in Ottawa.
Yeah.
Does it matter to America?
It might, depending on how the negotiations go, right?
Trent,
I don't know.
Does it matter if Canada's economy goes really badly? Does it affect America?
Oh man, the last 10 minutes of conversation lead to so many possible rabbit holes to go down, right? But that was what I was going to come up with next. Not specifically answering your question yet, um, but I think this is the second crossover into Canada and Canada politics. Is in a lot of ways, I think it's a nothing burger. This is what Trump does. He trolls.
He trolls. Yeah.
He gives these outrageous statements. I think it has the potential to impact the Conservatives negatively, because we are seeing, and again, this is purely anecdotal, online, but I'm seeing a resurgence of a lot of people just pushing back. And there's a lot of Canadian patriotism coming out, and the trope of Calvin pissing on something.
Mm-hmm.
Is now being used to piss on the word Trump.
Yeah.
I saw the Molson Canadian ad with the song "I Am Canadian" with all the iconic stuff in the background, the golden spike, or the last spike, and
Henderson's goal in 72 and
all
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All that stuff. I saw that last night, and I haven't seen that. I don't think I've seen that ad in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I think that there's a potential backlash against Trump that could impact, the right in Canada. Now, how far, to what degree? Now, maybe some people might turn back towards the Liberals. So, in terms of how does a weak Canadian economy affect the U.S., I mean, I'm no expert on these things, but my impression has always been when the Canadian dollar is weak, that just means on the sliding scale of everything else, that's better for us in terms of Americans buying our stuff. Right?
Yeah, it does make our exports cheaper compared to, say, international competition. But like I'm thinking, on the one hand, a very weak Canadian economy, let's say 5 more years of Trudeau. Let's say he doesn't step down. 5 more years of Trudeau, 5 more years of Freeland, or 4 more years of Trudeau, 4 more years of Freeland, 4 more years of Gibault. Now, number one, brain drain. This is now just a free line of Canadian expertise going into the United States looking for greener pastures. You don't have to worry about competition for foreign investment. In fact, that investment that would have otherwise gone into Canada is now coming to America. Canadian investment is now coming into America. So on the one hand, I would think the United States benefits from Canada being a dysfunctional economy. I don't really see how, if we're struggling, it hurts them. So they have zero incentive to want, making the assumption that Poilievre will improve the Canadian economy. I don't see how that's really in the American interest, just when I think about it right now off the cuff.
Oh, maybe. I mean, you're right, because I think you and I are going in the same direction with this. So it does remain. So is Trump somehow? Frankly, I don't believe Trump is wily enough to anticipate, 3 chess moves down the board like this.
I think some of his
that
people
he's
are
doing this deliberately to fuck over Poilievre, and then the Liberals stay in power, and then.
Well, you got to admit,
we end up
he likes having Trudeau in office because no matter how bad he fucks up, he can look at it and say, "We're better than Canada. Look at that idiot." No, seriously, he's made a point of doing that. Trudeau is the gift that keeps on giving for leaders around the world.
Yeah.
You can always say,
question. So I
we're
think
better than Trudeau.
Right.
Since Jacinda Ardern retired, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, coming out of this conversation, I think, so it's, for me, logically, it's like, okay, how badly does this trolling backlash affect Poilievre and the Conservatives getting into power? Because if the Conservatives do get into power, and they probably still should, notwithstanding.
Yeah, I still think they will. Yeah.
Then then we do end up with a stronger economy just by default, because no, I'm not even going to say irresponsible, the reckless spending
Yes.
on the public sector
Yes.
that is growing out of control. And on the one hand, and then on the other hand, like getting our natural gas out to
Yeah.
the rest of the world, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Ever since the Russian invasion, Europe has been begging
Yep.
for natural gas. And, Germany's been here, and I can't remember one of the other
Japan.
nations in
Japan
Europe
was
has
here
been
too.
here.
Yeah.
Japan was here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they want our natural gas.
We
and we're
need to
saying no.
get our oil and gas to Tidewater, both east and west.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
for reasons that make perfect sense to someone of a Laurentian mindset, there was very good reasons why they wanted to block that. Like, do everything you can to prevent that. Made perfect sense from a Laurentian mindset. It's just that now it's having
We've had the Laurentian
consequences.
conversation before. But I don't understand how. I mean, like I said, there's this paradoxical thinking that comes to the energy sector in this country. It is still the biggest moneymaker, and they rely on it, and that's where transfer payments ultimately come from, in the biggest chunk of them. So how just how far a Laurentian mindset can take the curtailing of the energy sector.
Well,
It becomes
you're
part of that
not
shooting oneself
wrong.
in the foot, right?
You're not wrong, but they don't want it taking over the country. Too much of influence and control over Canadian affairs has already shifted west of Winnipeg. And if you are of the old money of the St. Lawrence geography, this is seen to you as an inherently negative thing. It would be completely different if the oil and gas industry was centered in Ontario and Quebec. It would be a completely different mindset.
Well, of course,
100%. But the fact that you have it's a real comparable is the oil and gas industry in Siberia. How the old money, the elites of Moscow and St. Petersburg do not let Siberian centers get too big. Like, yes, they depend on it for money, they depend on it for revenue, but they do not want decisions made in Yekaterinburg or Magnitogorsk to weigh more than decisions made in Moscow or St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
I mean, cultural prerogatives kind of get in the way of dollars and cents, depending on your postal code, right?
Yeah, that may be
where you live.
The better. I always think of like parallels between countries, like comparing Alberta to Texas, for example. Like,
yep. Yeah.
And then, but for Canada and Russia, it's like, yeah, Toronto is Moscow and Montreal is St. Petersburg.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot like that, where instead of the Urals, it's the Canadian Shield.
Yeah.
And it's a whole other world out there.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, they depend on it and they want control of it, but they do not want it so that it is absolutely unacceptable to the Russian elites that Siberia could ever start dictating terms west of the Urals.
Yeah.
The decisions as to what happens in, Russian foreign policy are made in Siberia. No, they're absolutely not willing to entertain that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though they know they depend on Siberia.
Well, I mean, culturally and historically, I think Russia, as we've discussed many times before, is that's part of their political, their social setup, right? There's a lot more elitism, there's a lot more chauvinism in those terms, and under Putin, it's been the strongest it's been probably since Stalin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here, I think what we're seeing, man, it's like I find it hard to buy into Canada anymore in any way, shape, or form. Like, it's
as a concept,
and that's what makes this whole backlash. Well, yeah, because I mean, actually, you're mentioning the Laurentian now. You mentioned at the top of the program, the interests of Canada being defined purely as Ontario and Quebec.
Yeah.
I
Well,
would
and
add BC to that,
specifically the
right?
Niagara Peninsula. Like when they're talking about Ontario, if you live in Sault Ste. Marie or Sudbury, you may as well live in Swift Current.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit about you either.
No.
Or
No,
Thunder
there's no
Bay.
question. I
Thunder
mean,
Bay.
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
Northern Ontario
Well,
is
Thunder Bay,
they're just neglected.
Yeah.
everything I've seen, from an industrial or commercial point of view is Thunder Bay is essentially part of Western Canada.
Yeah, totally.
All
Totally.
all head offices, if they've got a brain in their head, have Thunder Bay serviced out of Winnipeg or
Yep.
as far west as Edmonton.
Yeah.
Right,
absolutely,
in terms of sales, in
Yeah.
terms of operations and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I'm throwing BC on there as well. So, and we are not Russia. There's only so far you can push this Laurentian thing because we're already seeing the cracks. Alberta has been getting more and more and more pissed off with things as time's gone on, to the extent that I consider myself a potential separatist. Like, what the fuck's up with that, right?
Yeah, that's quite
sick
the
of-
sea change.
I am sick of this nonsense. I'm sick of the nonsense from Quebec. I'm sick of the nonsense from BC, and I'm sitting in BC right now. That are preventing these things. We do need to get stuff to Tidewater, and right now our biggest way of doing that is through Texas, because Quebec and BC are blocking us.
Yeah.
I keep going back to, you know what? Let's work with Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Open up a port on Hudson's Bay.
I think that's also a really good idea.
Yeah.
Like let's get a pipeline to Churchill.
Yeah, absolutely.
It may not. We may only be able to run export out of there 10 months out of the year, but it's still better than 0 months out of the year.
Yeah. And then this creates this economic block, and the rest of Canada can. Well, I'll go out of my way to take the Maritimes out of this, but the two central provinces can go fuck themselves. I got no time for this nonsense, right? So
Yeah, it is very short-sighted.
Again, it's pure logic. This is where we agree, right? Because you can take climate change, and you don't need to debate climate change and whether it's happening and why it's happening. You can set it aside, right?
Yeah.
Because when it comes down to it, like, Canada is what, 2%, 3% of
not even
global emissions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's less than
we're taking
1%.
It's actually less than one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're taking this
yeah.
we're taking this hard line approach
Yeah.
to everything.
The other thing is
we can feel good about ourselves. A virtue signal, right?
if we can supply natural gas to the Pacific Rim, we can convert Indian and maybe Chinese as well, but certainly Indian. We can switch Indian power production off coal.
Yeah.
And get it on natural gas and oil, or but primarily natural gas. And that is a win in terms of global CO2 emissions.
You'd
So
think,
even if-
but you've got the
It just
you've got the hardliners out there, and they're all just there's no fossil fuels, right?
Yeah.
We're going to replace coal with nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody's
Or-
going to be living
yeah.
off the grid, and they've got their own little water mills in the stream out back, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's got solar
And that's
panels.
why I kind of think the political hijacks the environmental, or the environmental is a servant to the political. That the real goal here is to landlock Alberta production. That's the goal. And they're just dressing it in environmental clothing.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay, for those of you who can't see, I can see on camera, Trent is pouring. He's got this French press. He's just pouring that elixir of the magic bean into the cup, and he's grinning like a prick because he knows I'm sitting here drier than a popcorn fart in a caffeine deficit. Oh, man.
Would you like a Pepsi? I can get you one.
Do you have a Pepsi?
Not the same, man.
I have a
Pepsi.
Pepsi.
When we take a break, I'll take you up on that.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'm just going to sit here and watch Trent enjoy that.
Stew.
Just
Damn
oh
straight.
yeah, man, that's hard.
Right.
That's hard on a guy, Trent. That's
I'll
hard
take-
on a guy.
He
I'll take the
did.
win.
While we were talking,
Well,
while we were talking before you showed up, he apparently had to knit a kettle from somewhere because he said he had a French press, but he didn't have a kettle.
oh
Kettle.
yeah, go down
It's
to the front
true.
desk, ask to borrow a kettle or
So
something.
no, I mean, yeah, you missed all this. The place I'm staying in, they moved me out of a hotel because I'm here
Yeah.
for like 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah,
So I was in the hotel for 10 days, and they moved me to these other digs that are like
like a bed
quarter
and
of the-
breakfast
a
kind of thing.
quarter of
or-
the price. No, it's like this row of 5 lodgings side by side. It's like a little motel
Oh,
type
okay,
of setup, right? You just
but it's
walk out the
company
door and you're
owned
outside.
for transient.
No, but it's like $40 a night, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's very rudimentary. And the thing is, you have to supply your own sheets. So the company
Right.
had sets of sheets because they're used to staff living out of this place. And, Amber, who takes care of these things, she's amazing, right? So
Yeah.
she pulled together some sheets. She said they might not be the right size. I got here. Sure enough, they weren't. They're made for a twin.
Yeah, yeah.
So the next day I went in and I said, could you get a bedding set at the store today? Because she was running out to get the mail. And I listed out all the things, all the little nuances of this place. And she came back not only with that, but with a kettle.
She is amazing. She knows what's going
yeah.
on.
Oh, yeah.
Keeping
She's
She
switched
knows her
up.
onions. Yeah, she knows what's going
Yeah.
on. Okay, so in the meantime, enjoy that black gold.
Damn straight.
You bugger. Coffee makes the world go around. I've always said Saddam Hussein really screwed up. He never should have invaded Kuwait because really the United States can go months with an embargo on oil. They could. He should have invaded Colombia. If he got Colombia and wrap up the global coffee market, he would have brought the Western world to its knees in 72 hours. We would have done anything. We would have, we'd be speaking Arabic now, talking about President Hussein, because, we want that coffee.
Well, it's funny how there are very few things that I pay attention to when it comes to commodities, right?
Coffee's one of them.
The stuff that hits my radar is the price of coffee and the price of olive oil.
And olive oil, yeah.
Yeah, it's like somehow that stuff, I'll get that little earworm in my head, and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. Barely goes. Okay, so anyway, so that's how Canada's affected. Let's get back to Greenland. Since we're talking about Trump, what do you guys think is behind that?
I mean,
perplexing.
again, to me, it's a nothing burger, right?
Why do you think he's doing it? Yeah, we know he's not really going to take over Greenland.
Well, because
But why do you think he's doing it?
because suddenly a big part of the Arctic Ocean is now American waters.
No, it always has been. Ever since Nautilus came up through the North Pole ice cap in the 60s. It's been
But functionally, but even if you can make it legally American waters, that's advantageous to him.
Well, he's
They
already got that through Alaska.
Yeah, but then if he's got Canada surrounded, right? He's got his waters, and then his waters, and then an ally's waters in the middle.
Yeah.
Who gives him freedom of navigation, basically, anyway, or he takes it and they don't say anything.
My gut. Okay, and
There was also there's a bunch of discussion about the rare earth elements. A big trend.
I don't know. I don't know if there really is any.
Yeah,
Because if there was,
I know.
if there was serious mineral wealth to be had, Denmark would be extracting it, because Greenland is a giant black financial hole on Denmark's resources.
Yeah, but they seem disinclined to get rid of it based on their.
Well, also the Greenlanders don't really they want autonomy,
Yeah.
but they don't want to fund their own higher education.
Yeah. No, I understand.
They get free tuition, they send their people to Danish universities, and they don't want to have to do that on their own.
Yeah.
So they want autonomy, and they also still want access to the European. See, they have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
They don't pay any of the regulations for a European Union, but they still have access with their fish products into the European common market. So it's a pretty good deal for the Greenlanders.
Yeah.
They like keeping the connection with Denmark for that reason. My gut, I'm throwing a dart on this, and I want to know what you guys think about it, is that this is all part of Trump saying to Europe, I want you to increase your defense spending. Because, like, Denmark has 70 military personnel in Greenland, all from the Sirius Air Patrol.
17?
70. 70.
70. Okay.
Whereas the Americans have this massive base
Thule,
in Thule,
yeah.
with Marines, with Air Force. They got the whole nine yards. They're basically, the United States foots the bill for the defense of Greenland because it is strategic territory for them.
Yeah.
However, they have absolutely no influence on the political decisions that are made which affect that defense. For example, let's say Greenland allows a Chinese company to put up the 5G cell phone network.
Yeah.
And then the Chinese decide to put up a surreptitious listening post within the Huawei technical apparatus. And there's nothing the Americans can do about that. Yet it directly and immediately affects them.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if this is also like when Trump talks about Canada being the 51st state, he mentions two things. He mentions how there's a trade deficit that America wants to address, or that he wants to address. Mm-hmm. And then he mentions how we're defending Canada for free. And he's mentioned this with Greenland.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is his way of putting the rest of NATO on notice to say that you guys need to start putting as much militarily into NATO as America does, like 50-50.
Yeah.
Or we're going to leave.
That's an interesting question to me because, from the left, there's a lot of people in the U.S. and elsewhere who are like, if the U.S. took 10% of its military budget and spent it on social programs or, domestically or, some sort of, development projects internationally, right? That would be a really good thing, right? But at the same time, I guess I'm sort of kind of agreeing with Trump that the U.S., spends more than anyone else on their military budget, and we are reliant on them.
Yeah.
So it's a
it does. Like a lot of American defense budget is global security.
Yeah.
Right.
A big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the United States protects the global shipping lanes.
But he's also in a situation now too where his debt servicing is now bigger than his defense spending.
Yes.
Right.
And so he needs to start rolling stuff back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, again, if you get people to put their money where their mouth is, okay, so the U.S. is ponying up and it does reduce its defense spending. That means now this is a stretch. Those same people need to be able to also realistically, look at global security and say, okay, well, if the Americans are stepping away from some of that, then everyone else needs to step up, as they've already agreed to.
But they don't really mean it. They say it, but they don't mean it.
I know. So now he's upping it to 5%. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Nobody's, few are meeting 2%.
Yes. The biggest spender in NATO is Poland at 4%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to say the one exception to that might be Poland.
Yeah, and they're at 4.
Because they're taking shit very seriously right now.
Yeah. Well, living next to an aggressor tends to sharpen the focus. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a lot more keen on defense, like, say, Poland and Finland are a lot keener on defense spending than, say, Belgium and Holland.
Yeah. Aside from Kaliningrad, it's the aggressor is at least technically, it's got Belarus in between.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Belarus is a part of Russia for all intents and practical purposes.
It's a puppet state. So
yeah.
When it comes down to it. I'm surprised, actually, Belarus hasn't, given how close it is to Kyiv, I'm surprised they haven't been shown more involvement in things. So.
My understanding is the Russians were leaning on them very, very hard to participate.
Yeah.
However, Belarus is 2 countries. There's Minsk, and then there's everywhere else.
Okay.
Minsk is dominated by a Russian-speaking, ethnically Russian elite, and everywhere else is Belarusian, which wants to be Belarusian. Minsk The Russian elite in Minsk wants Belarus to be a part of the Union state, unified with Russia. And this is
Right.
definitely what Russia, Putin is pushing for. Whereas you've got, what's his name? Starts with an L. He's the president of Belarus. Lukashenko. Yeah. Lukashenko is walking a tightrope between these two factions. And Viktor Khrenin, his defense minister, told him, this is the OSINT rumor mill, that in 2022 said, if you participate in this invasion, I will resign because I cannot guarantee the loyalty of the army. That there was a very good chance that the Belarusian military, don't forget,
it's going to be more rural, and it's definitely not going to be.
Yeah, don't forget, there are 2 battalions of Belarusian volunteers in Ukraine fighting for the Ukrainians. And they have maintained the strength of 2 battalions right since 2022. Like they have a continual stream of volunteers.
That might be all they can maintain.
Well, they have one of the bigger foreign contingents.
Yeah.
You know, them and the Georgians. Anyway, so Krenin allegedly told Lukashenko, I cannot guarantee the loyalty of the army. That if you push the army into the invasion of Ukraine, they might turn the vehicles around and start heading for Minsk. So that's why Lukashenko has done everything he can to keep Belarus out of the formal conflict. So he allowed Russians to stage from Belarus. He allows Russian missiles to overfly Belarus. He allows them even to launch from Belarus. But he doesn't want to actually commit Belarusian troops.
Right.
And of course, this gets worse every week that Ukraine continues to hold out.
But you'd think that Russia would just continue to press if they've got right of passage. They just continue to cross Belarus territory to get to Kyiv.
They don't really have the troops. I mean, especially since the Ukrainian invasion into Kursk. The Ukrainians were able to move an entire mechanized brigade up onto the border with Kursk without the Russians detecting it. That's a huge step because now anywhere along the Russo-Ukrainian border from the north, all the way around to the Dnieper River and in Zaporizhia, anywhere, out of nowhere, the Ukrainians could launch a surprise offensive because they've demonstrated to the Russians they can move an entire strike brigade undetected. So now Russia has to garrison and fortify all of those places where it originally thought it didn't have to. So they simply don't have the troops to open up a third front.
Yeah, but to me it seems relatively simple politically. Now maybe I'm being naive here, but shorten the line. You know, you make defending you make, well, I don't know, just pull back. You know, just do a scorched earth for a temporary amount of time.
Kind of like
the line.
Well, kind of like the Surovikin line.
Defend Crimea at the neck, right? Stop holding areas you don't need to. Shift a whole bunch of shit to just rush, you know, just do a blitzkrieg, you know, through and out of Belarus and take Kiev. Right?
Well,
once you've taken
I don't know
Kiev, that's everything, right?
I mean, well, they did try that.
They tried that initially.
What's the difference between that and what happened in February, March, April of 2022?
Yeah.
Well, now things have stabilized to a certain extent.
I mean, the Ukrainians channeled them.
Your shortest approach, your shortest solution, it's right there.
What's the town by Hostomel Airport that was as far south as Russia got? Bucha.
Well,
the Ukrainians channeled that blitzkrieg into Bucha in this very long, extended, pincered spearhead, and then they lopped it all, and then they basically did what the Finns did in 1940 by just chopping it up into tiny little, like they just hit that long supply line and chopped it up into tiny little segments, and then eliminated those segments one at a time. So I would say that the Russians tried that and found that the Russians can't do maneuver warfare. They thought they could, they can't.
Okay, so, but I would go so far as to say, okay, now the Ukrainians are dispersed. You've got them engaged in other places. They're not where they were at the start of the war. Hopefully, I mean, the Russians came in there just chauvinistically thinking, "Oh, we're just going to take this thing in
Yep.
2 days."
Yep.
You'd hope they'd learned a whole shit ton of lessons. So unless it's a matter of terrain, and they just end up, they're forced into doing the same thing again, or maybe you just create a broader front in the north. Maybe you take 3 northern highways down. Eventually, from Belarus, eventually you got to get to Kiev, right? You change the dynamics of the war.
But
I'm not looking at a map right now, but
they would have to like gut.
Yeah.
I mean, they're basically contained in the south anyway, right? And they would have to like.
Well, the Ukrainian defense near Pokrovsk, between Toretsk and Pokrovsk, and it starts with a KH, the reservoir south of Pokrovsk, is hanging by a thread.
Right.
It's barely hanging. And I think where the Anne of Kiev brigade was, Kurahivsky, the Kurahivsky reservoir area.
Right.
From there to Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians are barely hanging on. And I think that's where the Russians are pushing really hard. I think what they're hoping to do is to simply just attrit the Ukrainians to nothing. Just simply break their back in an attritional war.
Right.
But
they wouldn't be able to do that if you started pulling forces off to divert back up to Belarus.
Exactly. Yeah, they wouldn't be able to. Yeah.
Right. And in fact, the Ukrainians might be able to go on the offensive down there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, like I think the Russians have found the Schwerpunkt, so to speak.
The center of gravity.
Yeah, they found the Ukrainian center of gravity. They've got them decisively engaged, and they are steadily and slowly grinding them to mincemeat. And it's working for them.
At what cost to themselves, though? Because
huge and massive.
Yeah.
And that's the question. That's the question, right? I mean,
who's going to break first?
Yeah.
Because it's not guaranteed.
And that's where it's the biggest gamble for Russia. An attrition war does not necessarily work in their favor. In fact, it's working in their favor less and less by the minute.
Because they're running out of equipment. They're running out of people. Like, they're not at the bottom of the Siberian barrel, but you can see through the last 2 inches of water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they can see the end of, they're not at the end of their manpower reserves, but they can see it from here. And their economy is teetering on the brink.
Exactly. So what they need is a quick, decisive, short-term offensive.
But they can't do that. They've already proven they don't fight that way.
Yeah.
You cannot make a Soviet army fight like a NATO army. The Ukrainians are finding that out.
Yeah, but I mean, if you've got the wherewithal, okay, it is attrition warfare, but if you've got enough to, like you said, find that center of gravity and make some gains and put that pressure on, then you've got the resources to do it in a different way, right?
Yeah, but do they have the culture? Do they have the command and operational culture to do it in a different way?
You're saying that they're okay. I mean, again,
let's turn it around.
If all they've got is still what they had in the First and Second Wars, which is
the
human wave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of.
All right.
Like let's turn around and look at it the other way. Do you think you could train Canadian troops to do frontal assault with no mission command? Every assault, you have a lane. You will not deviate from the axis of advance. You will not conduct a flanking. You just keep going in this direction on this bearing. You will not deviate more than 3 mils on either side, and you will keep going until all is exhausted.
Well,
you couldn't get Canadians to fight that way.
No, you
just wouldn't.
Exactly. Because we've proven that. We've become the shock troops in 2 world wars.
That's just not our operational culture. Well, the Russians
thank you,
have
Mr. British General. We're going to do things differently.
Yeah, it wasn't part of our you could make the argument. Pierre Burton did this very much better than I can. That the experience of creating Canada as a nation created a different type of soldier. Well, the Russian entire experience going all the way back to 1880 has created a very particular command culture and a very particular kind of soldier. And I'm sure they wanted to reform after the First and Second Chechen Wars, but they simply have not been able to do it. In the same way that Ukraine has struggled desperately trying to NATO-fy their army. But they are still struggling, like they cannot fight in echelon. They're still trying to learn how to do it. And the whole failure of their 2023 offensive was that they had NATO equipment and they had NATO company commanders and about half NATO battalion commanders, but the other half and their brigade commanders were still Soviet style.
Yeah.
And like this has been a huge controversy within Ukraine itself as to, trying to get rid of these old school graduates of the Soviet system pre-1991, or even pre-2010, because right up until 2014, the Ukrainians still sent their troops or sent their officers to the what is the Russian?
Frunz?
Yep, Frunz, and then the other one. Anyway, they still sent their people to the Russian military academies. They didn't send them to NATO academies. So they were still trained in that culture.
Yeah.
But you'd think, because you see examples, you get every once in a while, and it was surprising to me when I started to see them. You'll see that Zelensky's cleaning house for political corruption.
Yep.
You'll see it, and at the defense level, right? Like, we're going to change out this guy or that guy. After 3 years, you'd think if they've got them at the junior ranks, and they've identified that, okay, at the company level, at the battalion level, you've got this possible, then you carve out that old guard and promote the guys who are good, right?
You can, but it takes time to teach the skills. For example, we've got two brigade commanders that we're training right now that are going through the Canadian Staff School kind of at Op Unifier. One of them is a guy, he's a professional soldier. He joined the military in about 2010. And so almost all of his operational career has been in the post-2014 era. Like the 2014 when the Russians first invaded Luhansk and Donetsk. And that's when the Ukrainians came up with the phrase, a small Soviet army cannot defeat a large Soviet army. And then they understood that they needed to learn from NATO and change their operational art. So this guy started his career basically right kind of in that period. And he's absolutely on board with how, he believes, like he absolutely believes in the idea of maneuver warfare, in the idea of munition command, in finding the center of gravity, hit them where they ain't. That's when he's big on that. The other brigade commander, 3 years ago, he was a chef. What do you think the learning curve is for his staff, for his G5? What do you think the learning curve is for the guys in his G4 shop, handling equipment, logistics, planning? Like, if the commander is at that level of inexperience, what do you think his brigade staff is? Or the battalion staffs? Like, it's not just training an individual commander. There's a whole suite of enablers that go into that. Now, to complicate that even further, the Ukrainians do not, this will stun you, I mean this dead seriously, no hyperbole. The Ukrainians do not have divisional command. Like when we talk about the Ukrainians cannot fight in echelon, that's what we're talking about. After 1991, when they were nearly insolvent, as a budget cut, the Ukrainians disbanded every unit above division, above brigade. Mm-hmm. So brigade is their highest level of command. They have never had, since independence, a division or corps commander.
Well, how many brigades do they have out there?
Oh, they've got numerous brigades. Right now,
they're all
like
operating
30.
independently.
So what they do is they create they all operated independently until 2022. And now what they do is they have what they call provisional brigade groups or tactical brigade groups. Except these are temporary ad hoc arrangements.
Right.
So the guy who then gets your de facto division, I'm using air quotes here, divisional commander, your brigade group commander, he doesn't know his brigades. He has no familiarity with them. And he's not going to put in that effort because he is only going to command that formation for the next, say, 75 days till the operation is concluded. And then he's going to be rotated somewhere else. So they need to create, they don't even have that structure. And it's not something that you can just create when your house is on fire.
Well, and again, a division commander needs his entire staff too. Where are those guys coming from?
Exactly. This is all part of what we are trying to build in Operation Unifier in conjunction with the Poles, the Americans, the British, and the French.
Yeah.
Okay,
and of course, in a division, right, like the G1, the G2, the G3, those are not people, they're shops.
Yes.
Right.
They are entire
shops.
shops.
The brigade too, but they're a bigger shop in the brigade.
Yeah. Like for example, the G3, which is operations.
Yeah.
In our 3-day of context, is a full lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
Who has battalion command experience.
Yeah.
And has brigade staff experience.
Yeah, and he's got how many captains or majors working for him, and that many entities
to the commander. Now he's got a major in the G33.
Yeah,
who is smaller size, immediate attention to detail on ops and training.
Yeah,
he's got a major who's the G34, who handles equipment and resources, ammunition as it pertains to operations. Because there's also a G4. Who handles divisional level equipment, transportation, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the 34 and the 4 work very closely together.
Right.
But the 34's angle is, okay, how does this affect my pointy end?
Yeah.
You've got the 35 who handles planning within the operational environment, separate from the G5 who handles divisional level planning.
Yeah.
And so then you've got 37, like you have all of these, all like the Prussian staff system is all duplicated within the G3.
Yeah.
So it's not just one guy, one lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
He's got a group of say 7 majors.
Yeah, and those majors have
each one of them have 1 or 2 captains.
And those captains have
1 or 2 warrant officers.
1 or 2 warrant officers. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's
it's a large amount of expertise that you have to build.
Yeah.
It's the war's the ultimate team game, boys.
Yeah.
I think we all understand that, and we're seeing it play out in Russia. I mean, I think we stop there in terms of, okay, I think we just hit any listeners, theoretical or otherwise, with a whole bunch of stuff that they don't understand.
Yeah. Needless to say, the Ukrainians are trying to grow. They're trying to build something from scratch in a hurry.
Yeah.
No, I get that. And I think your analogy of trying to put out the fire, prevent the house from burning down,
while you're building it.
While you're building while you're building it, or while you're training to be a firefighter. Right?
Yeah.
But I guess my point would be, and I don't know the answer to this, but I suspect I do. They're doing this all externally, so they're flying out to Op Unifier in Latvia or wherever. When, certainly after the failure of the 2023 counteroffensive, and I would argue before that, NATO, Europe, everyone should have been looking at this and going, we need to be doing this in real time with the boots on the ground. So have advisors, right? Now that becomes tricky.
Does it ever?
Yeah.
Right, but if Macron is talking about having French boots on the ground, well, I think that's your starting point, right? Okay,
well, I
the
think
French are willing to be here on the ground, right?
And the Germans, not von der Leyen, the German defense minister, also said the same thing. That Germany would be willing, but I think they were talking about peacekeepers or truce observers in the context of a ceasefire.
We're talking about during
like advisors. Advisors in the MACV SOG Vietnam model.
Yeah, well, Macron is also talking, I think, about maintainers as well.
Yeah,
he's not talking about putting in combat troops. He's
talking about some
advisors and then some people to help with the logistical tail.
Yeah,
it seems to me that's what the reaction was. Everyone was hearing he's talking about putting combat troops in, right? But I think the easy answer, NATO, if it can find the political wherewithal and get away with it, that's the way to make this model work. 'Cause, okay, If they don't have the training, they have to keep cycling people out. It's going to take for fucking ever.
Mm.
You need to do it in the moment, right? Okay, I'm training you to be a divisional commander. I'm standing beside you as we do it, right?
I
And
know
below me,
that
I'm training you guys to be a bunch of brigade commanders.
I know that Canada has a former 3 div commander there on the ground. There's a guy, I'm not going to name his name.
Well, one of them retired and went over there. Is now commanding a Ukrainian division or something.
That guy.
Yeah,
he kind of was. There was some really trumped up sexual misconduct charges.
Yeah,
that were kind of bogus. But they were totally bogus, but they were just kind of done to it was really shadowy. It was really like,
well, liberals seem to do that with a lot.
Yeah, it was sketchy. It was really sketchy. Like they had their preferred person who they wanted as commander of the army.
Yeah.
And so they just needed a way to get rid of everyone who was more qualified. And so he kind of got thrown under the bus. That guy, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, no names mentioned, no pack drill. He's been in Ukraine, like standing beside the Ukrainian brigade group commander saying, this is what I think you should do.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's no shortage of other guys from other, like say the British and the Americans or whoever, right? I would imagine they've probably got a few of those individuals down there.
Now, this is not in an official capacity. This is ex-forces.
Self-mobilized.
Yes,
as they say.
Yeah. He left the Canadian forces and.
Yep, he is just down there as John Q. Citizen, purely private endeavor.
Yep.
But again, you don't just need that commander. You need thousands of those guys as support staff.
Yeah. That's basically the point. Is just like.
Yeah.
It's, you want to make brigades operate as a division, it's not just a division commander.
That's right.
It's a division commander and a company's worth of people to do planning.
It's about 80 to 110 people who have a lot of institutional knowledge.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Who have to be very senior people.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not random, right?
Yep, they're not random Joes. They're people who know how the sausage is made.
Yeah. Because our old friends, Jack Binsey, always told me, he's like, the way we do staff college now is screwed in the Canadian Army because everybody who is an officer gets to go to staff college, and it was never that way. It was always you had to show, some promise and as a future high-ranking commander to even get considered to go to staff college and to learn.
In Mark Julke's book about Ortona, he writes there's an anecdote of a corporal in the Seaforth Highlanders who a month into the battle found himself as company sergeant major. And that he started Gesundheit. He started the battle as a section commander, and because everyone else kept dying, within say 25 days, he's now company sergeant major, and he has no idea what company sergeant major is supposed to do.
Right. Yeah.
He just told, well, you're the sergeant major now. Well, what do I do? And the guy said, I don't know. I've only been company commander for a day. So I think that's kind of the situation that the Ukrainian army is in right now, and that I think they will succeed, but it's not guaranteed because the situation down by Pokrovsk is absolutely dire. No doubt about it. The only good news is the Ukrainians have a large amount of territory where they can just keep doing a delaying action withdrawal. And they've got a massive geographical barrier in the Dnieper between them and Kyiv. So even if that area of the front, even if the Pokrovsk front completely collapses, the Russians are only going to be able to go up through Zaporizhia to the Dnieper, and then they're going to have to stop whether they want to or not. The Russians have struggled mightily with river crossings. Well, the Dnieper is probably closer to the English Channel than it is to a regular river crossing. It's massive. So that would be a huge. That would be something that they would have to stop and digest. So even the worst case scenario for the Ukrainians isn't total defeat at this stage of the game. So Yeah, it's a question of like how damaged are they going to be? I suspect my gut, and I'd really like to get John's input on this, is my suspicion is that the Ukrainians are saying, let's hold and defend, because defense allows them to conserve their equipment and their manpower until the Russians literally expend themselves.
Yeah.
And as soon as either the economy collapses, they are no longer a mechanized army, or they run out of people. Whichever one of those three happens first, then maybe the Ukrainians have a brigade somewhere in reserve, or one of the brigades that they are training up now, they can unleash and make some kind of gain. Maybe, reacquire the Azov coast. Maybe take Crimea, or at least cut off Crimea.
Yeah.
So that they can seize it later, or do something. But I suspect that what they're doing right now is saying, just hold on, gradually trade Ukrainian land for Russian lives. Be as stingy as we can, but maintain our flexibility. Don't get decisively pinned down.
Yeah.
And bleed the Russians out. That's my
defense. Defense has been their strength the whole way along. I'm going to suggest a break so that you can get your Pepsi.
And you can get a dart.
I'm going to have a dart, and I'm going to brew another coffee.
Oh, you prick.
All righty.
All right,
We'll be back in a bit.
Back in a sec. Yep.
Oh, awesome.
I'm now on the
live.
right. I used to be on the left. Now I'm on the right.
All right.
What's going on with
crazy. It's product. It's truth in advertising.
Yeah. Because you're on the left on our screen, which is what
you should be on the left. So
exactly.
Yeah,
That's like, what the hell's up with that?
I don't know if they just changed the view, but
what the hell's up with that? So liberal leadership race, boys.
I was going to say, I think we got a bit away from the topic.
No, we were just deep diving on Ukraine.
I think we've gone with Trump. So what do you think of the actual race itself? What's the developments? Who do you like? What's notable? Give me your thoughts.
To me, it's utterly irrelevant. I think they're going to get their ass kicked anyway.
Yeah, but you got to play the long game.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Like, that's what I'm thinking. If you're going to take over the Liberal Party, you got to know that you're building for 2029.
Yeah.
You're not going to win 2025.
Yeah. But so I'm wondering if like the real potential future leader is not even in the race right now.
Well, I think that's definitely
what I'm wondering.
Right? Yeah, that's definitely what a guy like Dominic LeBlanc did, I think.
Yeah.
But do you think Mark Carney is seeing it that way?
I don't know what Mark Carney is seeing.
I think he's thinking 2029.
Yeah.
Because if you like, I'll bright side this for you, and then you guys let me know what you think. This is Carney's chance to completely rebuild the Liberal Party in his image the exact same way that Justin Trudeau did in 2013.
Yeah.
You can put your people in, your philosophy, your loyalists.
How many people and loyalists does he have?
That I couldn't tell you.
Right? Like,
I don't know. I don't know if he has that kind of ground game.
I kind of wonder if he's just like the second coming of Michael Ignatieff, right? Like,
in personality and saleability, that's what I think he is.
Well, and kind of like
But you think he thinks he's the second Michael Ignatieff?
No, probably not.
I think he thinks he's the second Trudeau.
Or something. Or the hybrid
which
Trudeau
one?
With Paul Martin or something.
Trudeau the Younger. In other words, like the guy who comes in, takes over, like the phoenix out of the ashes, and completely rebuilds the party into a new juggernaut. I think Carney sees himself that way.
Maybe.
Out of all the things he lacks, self-confidence is not one of them.
Sure.
Now, will he succeed? I'm not saying he will.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like, I agree with you. I think there are guys, and I'll put Dominic LeBlanc as one of them. I'll put François Champagne in that category as well. Guys are thinking, I don't want to take over leadership now because they're going to get their asses kicked.
Yeah.
I'll wait until after the house is burned down completely And then when we have a new convention that's not rushed, that's not a hurry up, get it done ad hoc arrangement, when we have a proper leadership convention, say in September,
Yeah.
then I'll come in.
Because presumably, like if the tradition of Canadian politics holds, Polyev wins,
Right.
assuming that that his government is not a disaster. He will likely get a second term.
Well, I don't know, but you're right. In the tradition, Polyev wins,
Yeah.
and so then the New Democrat and Liberal leaders both resign.
Yeah, but the Liberal leader is probably not going to resign after this election because the outcome is pretty much guaranteed, right?
And that's what I think
So
Carney figures.
Yeah. So, but if the Polyev government is not a disaster, he will probably get a second term, right? If Canadians can feel their...
I don't know, bro. I don't know.
No, because it's typical, right? Like,
I mean, maybe, but I give him at best 50-50 odds, even if he does a good job. Because I think at least 50% of the people right now who say they plan to vote conservative, it's not that they like Polyev. It's not that they like conservative policies. They just really, really hate Trudeau.
sure.
And they will run for anybody who has bad things to say about Trudeau. I could put a salt shaker up on the table, and if it had an F Trudeau sticker on it, probably a good 1/3 of Canadians of all political stripes would vote for it.
Yeah. But
Maybe.
anyway, I think you're maybe a little mistaken. But I think Polyev, if he doesn't shit the bed completely, gets a second term. As Ben's pointed out to me, always referencing
The Godfather,
the
Mahatma Jack Bins.
the Mahatma Bins, yeah. The what I used to call him. It doesn't matter. Anyway, you get 3 terms at the most in Canada.
In pretty much any Westminster democracy.
Yeah, you get 3 terms at the most.
Yeah.
So you're going to get kicked after your 3rd term. You're going to get kicked
No matter what.
No matter what happens.
Yeah.
I think if Polyev doesn't crap the bed completely, and I don't think he will.
Yeah, he's probably one of the better poised leaders.
Yeah, I think he gets a second term. So then if Carney can't make any significant inroads, and it has to be like holding maybe to a minority.
Yeah. Like if Polyev gets a second term, then Carney's done.
Yeah, if Polyev gets a second term, Carney's done. But if Carney holds him to a minority, maybe he's not.
Might. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
He might.
So yeah, like Frankie Bubbles and Dominic LeBlanc are looking for the outcome of that second term election.
Yes.
And if Polyev wins,
unless
then that's when their hats go in the ring.
Or maybe Carney gets absolutely obliterated. And he says, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the leader of like a 7 seat caucus.
Because it's possible they lose official party status.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe
it's conceivable in the upcoming election that they lose that badly.
Yeah, and it is possible. And maybe he walks away, at which point a LeBlanc Champagne.
Yeah.
What's her face? Freeland.
Yeah.
Although I don't think Freeland can win no matter what.
I don't.
I
think she's too tainted.
Way too tainted.
Yeah, like it might as well be like what's his name? The environment minister running it.
Yeah, exactly. Jubal.
Yeah.
Yeah, may as well be. What do you think happens to the New Democrats?
I think we're already seeing that. Well, I'd like to stick on the Liberals for a moment before moving on to the Democrats. I mean, I think you're right. Freeland is tainted. I'm already seeing, which is kind of surprising me, that just keeping my finger on the pulse of people I know that are into these things, like strongly behind the Liberal Party. They're already behind Carney, and
it seems that way.
And these are people who
it seems that the decision is already made
because she's a yeah. So there's that. Carney, I think my big question mark is he just another Ignatieff, right? On the one hand, I think that there is a strong argument for that because he is an outsider. He's never been elected. Yeah. He's coming in.
Well, he's essentially coming from outside the country, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he has the advantage that Ignatieff didn't have. Like Ignatieff was basically an American.
Yeah.
who was then, and he couldn't shake that carpetbagger kind of thing. At least Carney, has been governor of the Bank of Canada, during the Harper era. So, he's definitely has better institutional
and the Bank
knowledge.
of England too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they hired him because they thought it was Carney who was behind Canada's strong performance in the crash of 2009.
Yeah.
So that's why he got that gig as
the Bank of England.
governor of the Bank of England.
Yeah. So
I mean, for me, that should be his strength, because that's where the Liberal Party looks particularly bad right now, is fiscal responsibilities.
Yes,
so
that's his appeal
for him.
Yeah.
But I'm already seeing signs that people are already tying even his fiscal policies to climate policies.
Well,
right?
he
So that's
is
already a
really
negative attributed
huge
to
on
him.
that.
yeah.
And that's kind of what tainted him, or that's kind of why he's not governor of the Bank of England anymore.
Yeah.
In that he is
Right.
really, he's really drank the global warming Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
The other thing is his vulnerability on the campaign trail. He was the primary economic advisor for the last 4 years to the Trudeau Liberals. He's had tremendous, he himself has very strong connections to the current Parliament.
Yeah.
And saying like, hey, they've been
but
following
you can always
your
argue-
economic playbook, Mark. You have no answers here. So he is vulnerable in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he has a certain amount of scope to be able to say, yeah, I gave them advice, they didn't listen to it.
Yeah,
Right?
he could.
And we'll
Yep.
never know the truth
Yep.
of that.
And yeah,
Right. But
if you're on, say you're Carney's campaign manager, or if I was, that's absolutely what I would tell him to do, 100%. The only thing or not the only thing, the number one worry I would have is that Carney kind of has traditionally come across as a bit of a cold fish, kind of like Ignatieff. Like he didn't have the charisma that say liberal leaders traditionally have. Like, say what you want about Justin Trudeau, especially in 2014. That guy could work a room.
Yeah.
He had a dynamism. He had a charisma.
There's no question.
Right?
There's
His
no
father
question.
had
You're
it.
right. I see that.
Yep. Chrétien had it.
I see that in. I saw Carney on a short clip of him with Jon Stewart the other day. And I'm just looking at him like, you're right. He has no charisma. Another big question mark I have is because we're kind of in uncharted territory here. Before I've seen after Mulroney, the Tories completely imploded.
Yep.
Right, and they lost official party status.
Yep.
Right, and then we had the reform years, and then we went through the exercise of the right kind of seeing, well, we can't keep splitting ourselves now. We got to reconsolidate, right? And we were seeing that last time with Trudeau the Younger. Mm-hmm. At that point, it was looking like the New Democrats were going to be taking all the left and center left. Until Trudeau the Younger came up. Now, so for me, it's a question of, okay, is that simply name brand and the self-confidence, charisma / arrogance that he had that was able to push that forward and actually regain them that brand? And I don't know that anyone in the near future, the next 10, 15 years, is going to be able to pull that off in the same way.
Like, say, to completely remake or rebrand the party, or what do you mean?
Exactly, like bring it back from the absolute abyss it's in right now. Because, I can't remember exactly when it happened in British politics, but Labour used to be nothing, and the Liberal Party in England used to be something. And then at some point, some politics completely tanked them, and they have never recovered from it. Labour filled up that vacuum, and it's been there ever since, right? So are we looking at that?
I don't know. Do you think we'll see, let's follow the segue. The New Democrats are in transition. I cannot see Jagmeet Singh leading the party after the next election. almost every projection shows them as losing seats. What do you do if you're the New Democrats?
I don't know. New Democrats have always been hardcore, right? They've always, or sorry, hardline.
Yeah.
So they're trying to maintain, and as such, I think they'll always remain out of power federally.
Mm-hmm.
They're at the best of times, they're seen as kind of the conscience of the country. They're kind of speaking up and kind of they become this vehicle for Canadian public sentiment that kind of guides as opposition, but that's all they're ever going to be. Lately, they've been so tied into the unilateral, vociferous, hardline, woke left concepts that they're part of what's pushing everyone away from the center left. Just like what happened in the U.S., right? So that's what they really need to come to grips with.
Do you think
they are completely?
Do you think we could see a merger to create a liberal Democratic Party?
I don't know. At best, again, using the British example, the Lib Dems are a weird force, but then again, there's nothing to kind of fill the vacuum right now. So
because ideologically, the Liberals under Justin Trudeau are just as left as the New Democrats, maybe even further to the left.
I haven't seen that. I mean,
with a guy like Gibault,
yeah. So he's been
like not just the woke side, but like in his economic policies. Like there's not a lot of daylight, or there's not a lot of points of obvious disagreement between the two caucuses on like the grassroots issues. You are splitting votes. Like unless maybe you come to an agreement where you say, okay, look, let the New Democrats occupy that niche in the spectrum west of Thunder Bay. Liberals, you take east of Thunder Bay. And you could cooperate. But again, what is the benefit to the progressive movement of having these two parties in separate rooms?
Well, progressive covers a lot of a lot of ground these days, right? And again, it's people considering things strategically versus ideally or idealistically. So in a lot of ways, you'd think the Greens would benefit.
100%.
So what I'm wondering is, let's say you go with a Lib Dem.
Mm-hmm.
So a bunch of people go Lib Dem. I think you end up with four parties out of that at best, right?
What's that?
I see a lot of people remaining true liberals, a lot of people remaining true NDP, a lot of people going Lib Dem, and then the Greens picking up a fair chunk of support.
What's the ideological or philosophical difference between the Greens and the New Democrats? Where do they disagree?
The Greens are specifically environmental, and you can have people who might otherwise vote conservative vote for the Greens, whereas you won't find people who would otherwise be conservative voting for the New Democrats, right?
What do you think about that, Steve?
So the environmental mandate is alone on its own is not purely a New Democratic thing.
Yeah, I understand. I think the Green Party was conceptualized probably internationally.
Yeah, I mean that was maybe the sales pitch, but practically speaking, the Greens are hard left.
Yeah, like anybody who's
anyone who knows the Greens, anyone who's attended a policy conference with the Greens.
Well, and look where their only elected reps are from.
Yeah,
right. Like it's the people who the New Democrats weren't left enough for.
Yeah,
right.
Or basically people who are angry at very, say, particular personalities within the New Democrats who then vote Green as a protest vote. But again, I just, don't get me wrong, as a conservative, I'm glad to see them vote splitting. But as like the strategist side of me says, like, why the New Democrats, the Greens, and the Liberals are, like, I can understand why the Liberals do it because they benefit from this arrangement. But I do not understand why the Greens and the New Democrats are working at cross purposes. Makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Because, well, I mean, we're seeing this in so many ways, but the Greens are purely an environmental mandate, and the New Democrats have more things to consider. For example, the working class jobs, blue collar jobs, they're in mining, they're in oil. It varies from province to province. But I think, in particular, recently you're seeing that in British Columbia. At least since I've started paying attention to the governments that are here, I find it very interesting how, the Lower Mainland is very, 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 very left and very, very environmental. The rest of the province not.
The BC hinterland. Yeah,
when it comes to mining in particular, I think the New Democrats have had to, walk a very, very fine line, because economically the province needs certain policies in place.
Kind of like the not really New Democrats in Alberta.
Exactly, and I think that was, that's the strongest argument I've always had. For anyone who's got criticism of Notley and the NDP in Alberta, it's like, listen, she was at least taking it from the point of view of Alberta and on a sliding scale relative to our economic base, right?
Yeah, having social programs on the welfare state is great, except you need money to do that stuff.
Yeah,
like you can't the public sector will not volunteer their time. If you're going to do all these great, grand, and beautiful things with government, you got to pay them guys, and you can't just borrow indefinitely. Saskatchewan found that out.
Well, I mean, that's always been the argument. That's that's one of the surprisingly many things we actually agree on, right? I got no time for anyone who's got this hardline approach to this, that, and the other fucking thing, but nothing to back it up, nothing to actually make it happen, right? You got these ideals, but no pragmatic way to carry them out. Short of, all right, now we're all going to be living in fucking tents. As a nation, because that's not a particular vision I think most Canadians embrace, and in fact, it's impractical for those of us who live.
I think that's kind of
north of the border, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the story that we've experienced of late on the federal level, and in particular in BC, where David Eby inherited basically 2 terms of prior New Democrats who definitely had a much greater priority on social justice issues than on economic issues. And conditions across British Columbia deteriorated, like social capital deteriorated, like where we're talking about secondary and tertiary effects of a poor economy, such as homelessness, deaths of despair, crime. All of these things came to such a boiling point where we came within a hair's breadth of a conservative government in British Columbia. Like, are you kidding me? What's next? Toronto wins the Stanley Cup? Satan ice skates to work? Like, for real? Come on. What's next? A Republican governor in California? Shut up. You've got to really ask yourself, especially when you consider that these were not who's a leader of the BC Liberals? She was toying. She dipped her toe in the water. Christy Clark. This is not a Christy Clark kind of type conservative in name only. The guy who was Gordon, I think his name was, in BC. He was, the conservative leader in BC.
I can't remember.
Whatever his name is. He was actually talking like legit conservative shit.
Yeah.
Like an anathema to the kind of stuff you see in the Lower Mainland.
Yeah.
The rage, the anger within the NDP traditional voter base had to have been, like, how high does it have to be that guy's even in the running anywhere west of Kamloops? Like, come on. Yeah. Things were bad shape over there. So anyway, that's my rant.
I can't even remember what we were talking about before that.
Yeah, you know what? Neither did I. That's why I just gave you the hot potato, hoping you would run it. Totally threw you under the bus, Trent.
We were talking about the liberal leadership race.
Right. Like, are you playing the long game?
Yeah, but we...
And then we went to the NDP.
But we'd gotten to
what do you do if you're the NDP? Right. And should they merge? Merge?
No, I think it was, we were along the lines of, the Greens versus the New Democrats. What's the difference? Right?
Well, definitely.
It's a specific mandate.
Who's that whack job, moonbat nutbar, who leads the Greens federally?
Elizabeth May?
Yes. She is a kook's kook. Like, again.
Isn't her riding Salt Spring Island?
I would think. But again, like how, what's not to love about Elizabeth May if you're the New Democrats? What is there a single issue where her,
for one?
Okay, but she's like the right gender and all that.
She doesn't necessarily care about universal health care. She doesn't necessarily care about universal daycare or dental care, right?
Have you read her policies? There is zero daylight between Elizabeth May. She would fit right in any, like, the crazy of the crazy is the Vancouver New Democrats. She fits right in their policy conventions. Have you ever heard a word that come out of her lips that was not in full support of everything, and like in not just in deed but in principle? And I don't mean this hyperbole. I mean seriously. Is there any fundamental disagreement? Like, I'm not saying, like, I hear what you're saying, that her technically the Greens say, look, we don't want to talk about healthcare, we don't want to talk about dental care, we want to talk about the environment. But if the New Democrats said, okay, fine, but this is our policy on healthcare, there is not a single thing in that policy that Elizabeth May would disagree with, or that any Green voter would disagree with. Again, as a conservative, I like to see the left divide its votes.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why they're doing it. It's just a gift. It's just a gift to everyone who's doesn't share their aims.
The conservative movement in Canada did it for a decade too, when we had,
Yeah, but that was a necessary correction because the conservatives under Brian Mulroney and Joe Clark were not conservative.
Sure.
It was a necessary righting of the ship, right?
Mulroney, to his quote unquote credit, he brought NAFTA, right? I don't think there's any arguing that NAFTA was a good thing. It really opened up the economy. What killed him was the corruption, and it was the same level of corruption. This is why for me, the fact that we get these two parties back and forth, up until the advent of the social media age, anyways, we had these two parties back and forth politically, and for me, they had more in common than they didn't.
Yes, and that's a problem. That's a problem. Like Mulroney, he had corruption, no doubt about it. He was crooked as a dog's hind leg, but that will bring down a government of any stripe. So that's like that. Anybody, exactly, as it should. Like say the current government and the Chrétien government, they all had struggles with corruption, which definitely cost them politically.
Yeah.
But Mulroney did not do anything that a conservative voting base would want. In other words, he did not cut taxes. He did not roll back the size of, like, he didn't roll back regulation. He did not cut the federal civil service. He did not do anything to lessen the scope or the influence of government in the life of the private citizen. He did none of this stuff.
Yeah.
Joe Clark,
in fact, he brought in the GST.
He should have been a liberal.
Yeah.
Because Joe Clark there was nothing conservative, like in what we think of as in a traditional Edmund Burke style, or say in a modern style, like a Daniel Hannan style conservative. There was absolutely not a conservative instinct in that man's entire body. So that whole going into the wilderness, where the Reform Party pulled the Conservatives back to their roots, that had to happen.
Yeah.
Doctrinally, that had to happen.
The Reform Party wasn't doing it from a fiscal point of view. It was doing it from a social point of view. It was all Western based.
No,
right?
it was also, it was definitely fiscal as well. Yeah, it was social as well. But there was a huge, like they were the guys, they were the only reason why we started talking about the federal debt and deficit is because of the influence of the Reform Party.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there was a gentleman's agreement that we don't talk about, like between the Mulroney Conservatives and the Chrétien Turner Liberals. We don't talk about the debt.
Yeah.
We don't talk about deficit. We just ignore it. It was the Reform that put that on there.
Bringing up Joe Clark is irrelevant, right? The guy was in for a very short time. He was a red Tory. He was just a weak leader.
He served in the Mulroney government its entire, right?
Yep.
Like he was prime minister for a very short time, but he served in the Mulroney government for quite a long time.
And he was emblematic of that red Tory caucus that had that gentleman's agreement that, you know what, we really don't rock the boat. The only difference between them and the Liberals is that Joe Clark drove the speed limit. They both stood for the same things. They both stood for big government, big regulatory state, absorption of or concentration of powers in the federal government at the expense of the provinces. There was, there was nothing conservative about Joe Clark. There was lots that was liberal about, say, Jean Chrétien and John Turner. Like they at least had a platform that they stuck with. You know, like you could maybe, find stuff to attack the Liberals from on the left, but not nearly as many reasons to attack Joe Clark on the right, or even the Mulroney Conservatives, which is kind of my point, that until the Reform got involved, the Conservative Party was dominated by red Tories.
Yeah. Well, and even Joe Clark took a dump on the Conservative Party a few years ago, I think when... Was it just after Andrew Hu got elected, or just after Aaron O'Toole got elected as leader?
I think it was just after Andrew Hu.
Yeah.
I think it was after Scheer. Yeah, he made some kind of statements about he didn't like where they were, and the entire Conservative Party said, "Joe, shut the hell up."
Yeah.
Like you were a massive mistake.
Yeah.
It did not go. He was not regarded as the elder statesman that I think he perceived himself as.
Yeah.
Or at least out west.
Yeah, but there's always been,
for sure,
there's always been a place in conservatives circles for, for the red Tories, right? And I've brought up before,
as seen by the red Tories. Like the Conservatives themselves have never liked those guys.
What the anecdote I've always used is, I think it was, Ray Martin went to Dick Johnson's funeral, and he went to sit at the back because it was during the Klein years, right? So there had been this transition within the Tory party from the Lougheed type Tories to the Klein type Tories, and so Dick Johnson was part of the Lougheed bunch, and all those guys were sitting up front. And Ray Martin went to sit in the back, and they said, "No, you come up and sit here with us," right? Because again, that they felt that Ray Martin was more with them than the Klein Tories, right?
Yeah, so but how many red Tories
ever isn't within the Conservative Party?
But how many red Tories? And I don't mean just here in Canada. Throw in Australia, throw in New Zealand, throw in the UK. How many red Tories anywhere achieve leadership of their parties by being honest about their left-wing side? They always deceive their own parties about how left they really are. You will never find a guy like a Joe Clark who comes right from the get-go saying, yeah, I like big government, and I really don't trust free markets, and I really don't trust the individual citizen. I do think we really need a strong guiding central government to kind of shape the agenda of the nation. And the Conservative Party says, yeah, you're right, let's make this guy a leader. Never.
I don't think you can argue that Peter Lougheed wasn't a red Tory in that vein, but he came in here and in Alberta, he was a conservative.
He never,
there was
ever.
no way he.
Yeah, but if you look at his electoral campaign in 71, when he overthrew the social credit, he taught, and you'll see this when you look at the kind of the post-mortem on his years after he retired, was that, he talked a great capitalist, right-wing conservative game. He talked that game. He never once campaigned on the idea of saying, like, I really want statism. He did it, but he always said, like, he was all red Tories are of two faces. There's what they present to their membership, where they talk blue Tory. But then when they get behind closed doors, then the red side comes out. And you don't find that with guys like, say, a Harper, like a Manning, like a Poilievre, where Poilievre, I'm not going to count in there. He hasn't been in office yet. But say like a Ralph Klein. Ralph Klein was a shock to nobody when he did what he did, because he was not a red Tory by any stretch of the imagination, but he never campaigned as a red Tory. He never came out saying, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna build healthcare. I'm gonna protect the welfare state. Albertans are undertaxed." Like, he didn't steal policy from Lawrence Decore. He didn't steal policy from I don't even remember the name of the New Democrats at the time. He was a doctrinaire conservative, whereas red Tories are that phenomenon where they basically lie to their own membership. Before they ever lie to the electorate, they lie to their own membership about who they really are.
Well, I hear, so it's at this point I find, now we kind of devolve into the conversation we were having by text earlier in the week. I've got you're obviously very, very, very passionate, but when you start presenting things as lies, that's where I'm kind of like,
okay,
there
Trent,
is a difference between there is a difference between a red Tory and a liberal, and a red Tory and a New Democrat. Like,
what is it? Other than being more moderate, which was my comment about driving the speed limit. But is there any fundamental disagreement between, say, a guy like a Joe Clark and Jean Chrétien?
What I find, when I look at someone like Peter Lougheed, I've learned along the way to respect the red Tory concept, right? Because there is a difference, right? It's a fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
But it still tries to acknowledge and work within certain welfare, social programs and stuff. Like, acknowledge that there are some things that we expect of ourselves as a society for the least fortunate amongst us, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Ralph Klein, to me, was an ugly, ugly, ugly person.
God
he was
bless
simplistic. Him. He was unimaginative.
Love that guy.
He was mean. He was mean-spirited. Like, it was just.
I should get a portrait of Ralph hanging in my house.
Get a tattoo.
Get a tattoo.
Full back.
You could get a monkey and put him in charge of the Conservative Party in this province, and he could do the things that Ralph Klein did, right? It was all completely simplistic, and so it's easy. You want to reward someone for having a lack of imagination? No, right?
Well,
find someone to me
but
and actually
courage.
Think things through. So he's everything I've said about the woke on the left and how they just got these ideals in their heads, but no pragmatic way to get there. That's the same way I feel about Ralph Klein. He came in and
what do you think his ideals were?
Ralph actually achieved things.
Yes, he did. Well, Trent, what do you think his ideals were? What do you think his goals were when he? Hang on, let me look up what his years were. What do you think his goals were in his first term?
What do I think his goals were?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I can't speak to that, right? What I can say is this.
Don't you think you should?
I know. he slashed budgets and he balanced books, right? Nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
right? But if you're doing it, again, unimaginatively, if you're saying, well, if my mandate is to do it in 1 month and fuck everything that pays a price for it, instead of being able to think about it and kind of go, okay, how can we roll this out in a way that we can still maintain, identify and maintain some social programs that have value. No, he had none of that, right?
None of the social programs went away.
Yeah. Do you think he shared that view? That those what social programs do you think he felt had value?
If you're asking me off, because it's been 20 years at
Yeah.
least?
Or as you remember,
Right.
see, I don't think he felt any social programs had value.
Exactly. And that's my problem.
Yeah,
right?
but
and like I said, a trained monkey can come in and go, no social programs have any value. I'm going to balance the budget in a year, right? Great, yay you, right? Now that's why I wouldn't vote for a guy like him. That's why I prefer to have, I'm not going to pull anything, That's why I'll go back to Lohi before I.
Right, because Lougheed was further to the left.
To decline.
But this is what I don't understand about, I don't criticize a guy, let's say Elizabeth May. I don't criticize her for not being right wing. I don't expect her to. You know what I mean? I expect her to be radical left. That's kind of what her job is. I don't ask the New Democrats to elect a right-wing guy because that would kind of negate what makes them New Democrats. So why do people on the left get mad at the Tories for not, or criticize the Tories for not having red Tories? What did you expect? Of course Ralph cut everything.
Because
that's what his ideological goal was. My tablet is screwed. It's not opening up at all.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, now you've hit on the nub of the point, right? What is a conservative? Right?
What do you think a conservative stands for? What do you think a conservative stands for? No. I know what I think it is. What do you think a conservative is?
All I can do is point to examples of it, right?
Okay.
And generally, and again, I've said this before, with the two parties going back and forth, federally my whole life, right? One thing I've learned is, in some ways, there's not a lot of difference between them. In other ways, my life carries on, right? The economy goes through cycles anyways. So it's, unless the changes in government are aligning exactly with the changes in the economy, it's all a fucking crapshoot anyways.
1992
right? So
to 2006. That was Klein's tenure.
Yeah.
We just asked earlier. I just found it.
14 years.
Yeah, 14 years. So, but again, what do you think defines, say, a conservative? Give me your take on what a typical conservative stance is in terms of, say, the role of government.
Well, I don't think we can do that. In fact, what I'll point to is the fact that over the course of this conversation, that conservatives have fallen within a spectrum along the way, and you are, passionately embracing one vision of it and dismissing the rest as not really conservative. I'm looking at this and going, well, here are some things I've found palatable along the way about some conservatives, right? So I don't like Ralph Klein. And I've said the same thing about like I was saying about the woke left. If you've got these ideals, but you don't have a pragmatic way to achieve them, right? Fuck off. And the same way with Klein.
Are you saying that, Klein wasn't pragmatic in his goals? Or that you're saying he wasn't pragmatic in how he went after his goals?
Oh, Hitler was pragmatic in going about his goals. Doesn't make it a good thing.
Yeah. No, but you couldn't say level that criticism of Hitler. Like, say he had his goals, and he was pretty pragmatic as to how he went after them. It was terrible for humanity.
Exactly.
Right.
So
Steve's got something here.
Just a bit of a joke, not even my joke, but Jonah Goldberg always joked that when people called Trump Hitler, tying the conversation to get back to the old man, that people call Trump Hitler, his joke is, no, Trump's not Hitler. Hitler could have repealed Obamacare.
How about Margaret Thatcher?
ugh.
What are your thoughts on her?
You're on the Iron
heart.
Lady?
I'm on the Iron Lady.
Did you say no heart?
No
Why?
heart, no soul.
So a
heart,
similar
no soul.
criticism to Klein, in that they felt that a lack of compassion.
So, and again, don't have a ton of detail here, but here's what I remember. And this is the trend now, going back to the trend back then. And we're going back to the trend back then. Okay, Trent was into punk and all that shit, you know. So, you know, Margaret Thatcher was bound to be anathema to where I was at.
Because Joe Strummer told you.
So I was high. I was
Well, that's where I was at. I was pretty left at the time.
Yeah.
Because Joel Strummer told me.
But this is the example I'll use, right? And this is entirely perception, right? Going back over 40 years now, right? But it was the miners' strike. And to me, this is a good example. You know, I would extrapolate it and use it for the Klein criticism I have right now. When you're looking at a miners' strike, why are the miners on strike? Now, again, I've come a long way in terms of, okay, why do miners or anyone strike? You got to be able to look at the situation, put it in an economic context. You know, I'm able to put those things in better context than I was at the time, right? But I think anytime, you know, in this case, Thatcher, a leader has to just go in and just hard lines say, screw those guys. I'm going to send in a bunch of guys on horses and beat them with sticks, right? Instead of actually finding some resolution to the problem. That is not a good leader, right? That's not good economic policy.
Isn't that Justin Trudeau?
There's something underlying all that.
Were you talking about the truckers? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
Thank you.
Sore spot.
We're just sitting here triggering each other. People.
Just
trigger.
Okay. How about Ronald Reagan?
Like when he went after the.
I would argue.
Oh, I got to look him up too.
Like because
so
Reagan broke the air traffic controllers, right?
Yeah, didn't he? Didn't he get engaged in some stuff like that?
Well, yeah, because the air traffic controllers went on strike,
Right.
and he just fired them all and hired new ones.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead. What are your thoughts on Ronald Reagan in this same vein?
Okay, so again, tricky territory because this is why I keep saying playing chess with the devil, right? So I can say what I think of Ronald Reagan. Everyone points to Ronald Reagan as a fucking hero of the right of
In the
conservatism,
United States, absolutely.
Yeah.
right? So I look at it, and anyone who talks to me about trickle down economics, I laugh. I laugh in their face because it has not worked, right?
Who's ever championed trickle down?
Well,
I've never found anyone as never found any like actual serious like guy on the right champion
That
trickle
was
down.
Reaganomics, man. It was Reagan who came up with the concept. Oh yeah, we're going to make all these reforms, and it's all going to trickle down, and it's going to benefit everybody. And it didn't.
Would you
In
believe
fact,
me if I told you that
when I
Ronald
talk
Reagan never ever publicly uttered the words Ronald Reagan or trickle down? That you will find no audio.
Here we
Researchers have looked for it. It does not exist. He never ever said the words trickle down.
and actually, a lot of the things I've found this out in the wake of Jimmy Carter's recent passing. That a lot of the reforms that people attribute to Reagan, deregulation of the transportation industry in the United States being one of them, were actually policies that were signed into law by Jimmy Carter. Which
Really?
I was not, because my dad always complains about deregulation of the trucking industry
As a
as when it
bad
quit.
development.
Yeah, because it and I disagree with him on this.
Yeah.
But but he's like, prior to that, trucking was fun, and it was it was easier to make money and stuff like that. And then after deregulation, it just became so much more competitive.
I just find the whole trickle down thing interesting because if you look in
everybody
Joseph Schumpeter's seminal work of the entire history of economics, you will not find a single reference to trickle down. Trickle down to me is this it's a straw man. It's a straw man created by the left. You will never find me one conservative leader anywhere. Again, it's not just me who said this.
Yeah.
Daniel Hannan has gone public.
Oh
with
my
this,
God.
in that there's not a single conservative thinker or leader in history who has publicly espoused the words trickle down.
I have no idea where the term came from.
Came out of the Democratic Party in the United States.
Did it?
Yeah. They're the ones who coined the term.
Wow.
But anyway. So now, trivia, Trent.
Trent's Googling.
I told you the dates of Ralph Klein.
am Googling.
Don't look this up. What were the dates that Margaret Thatcher was prime minister? Now, here's your reference point. Klein was 1992 to 2006. What were the dates of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher? If you get both of them, I will buy you a dish towel of your favorite color.
Dish towel.
Okay, Reagan's easy. Reagan was 80 to 88.
Oh, but you're so close.
Done.
I got to give it to you. 81 to 89.
Well, you're going from inauguration.
Yeah, okay,
He's talking about elections.
Okay,
I got to give you that one.
elections.
I got to give you that one because you can't be that close and have me nitpick. But Thatcher, this one's going to be tougher.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
she was
this one's
elected
tough.
earlier than a lot
It's
of
not
people
gonna be
think. I
that.
think.
Yeah, it's
And
gonna be
then she
tough.
was out of office earlier than a lot of people think.
Yeah,
Because people think she
Okay,
paralleled
I'm
Reagan pretty closely, but yeah, she was earlier and then was retired earlier.
going. Yeah. So okay,
I have
give
my
me some
guess.
clues there. I'm going to ask for a year either way at either end.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was elected in 78, and she was done in. Oh, 84.
Oh, thank God! I thought I was buying a dish towel for sure.
Before you answer, can I take a stab?
Yes, you can, but you don't get a dish towel.
That's fine. I don't want a dish towel.
I don't. Yeah, well, that's sour. That's so sour grapes. I didn't want a dish towel. Anyway, go on.
74 to 86.
79 to 90.
Ooh.
When you said 78, Trent, I thought, holy shit, we're going to Walmart, boys. I'm buying you a dish towel. But thank God, you missed the 1 year window.
She was in that long, eh?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. Because, she completely, before Reagan and after Reagan. In 81 to 89.
Yeah.
But I was really not long, though, because she would have left
Just-
mid-1990.
Just before and then just after. Yeah.
But Ralph Klein missed those eras completely. He took over afterwards.
Yeah.
But I definitely see him as following in those ideological footsteps.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
No, I always find, I always equate Klein with George W. Bush's, or not George W.'s,
HW.
Bush
HW.
one's, his 1,000 Points of Light and
City on the Hill.
If You're Not With Us, You're Against Us.
Let me turn this around, Trent.
All that stuff.
Instead of picking on guys that you don't like, give me 3 names of leaders in
Yeah.
the Western world you do like, and tell me why.
What, in history?
Yeah. Let's say post-war era.
Or say in our lifetime? In
No.
my lifetime?
Nope. Even before, anytime after 45. Let's throw the gates wide open in the Western world. So it could be, say, an Italian premier. It could be.
Are you a big Aldo Moro fan?
It could be, say, an Australian figure. Anybody you want. Anybody you want. Post-war era. Who do you like? Why?
Oh, now you've really opened it up. Okay, so
No, I've stunned you. You're so busy. You're so busy thinking I'm coming after you. You're thinking okay, what's the trick? What's it? No trick, buddy. No trick. Who do you like?
no. So I'm going to sidestep Castro and Guevara because
Oh, really? You put them on that list?
let
Like they'd be in your top 10?
I don't know.
Oh, wow. Okay. Keep going.
I don't know. Because at this point, it's like now you're talking about icons and the symbolism that goes with them, as opposed to
Okay, so not
anything true.
necessarily
There's
hard policy, but like kind of what they stood for or what they represented,
yeah,
maybe. Maybe that'd be better
yeah.
to say. Wow.
Let's see.
Wow.
I had someone. Okay, so I don't. Actually, I don't know enough about Jimmy Carter when he was president and his
Mm-hmm.
policies and the effects of those policies. But as a man,
Mm-hmm.
finding out everything about him after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
very interesting guy,
Yeah, but
right?
let me
Very, very good example of what a leader could look
let
like,
me tie
right?
you down to a guy whose policies you like then. Let's narrow it, like maybe that'll help focus it. So maybe the guy could have been a dirtbag, like a womanizer or whatever, but you thought he had good policies. And it could be a girl. Like let's Indira Gandhi if you want. Golda
I don't
Meir
know
if you
enough
want.
about her. Ooh, now you're talking.
And then but you got to tell me why. You got to at least point out some kind of policy. They say, yeah, this was good. I can really get behind that policy. How about
You know what?
How about that? Juan Perón.
Or Eva.
Eva
I
Perón.
don't. I don't know enough about the Perons.
Okay.
Right, and Argentina prior to democratization, whenever it was in the 80s or 90s, I don't know enough about
right.
that at all.
How about a Swedish leader?
No.
No.
Uh,
A Labour prime minister in the UK?
no, all that comes to mind is Blair, and he took them into Iraq. So no,
And he wasn't really doctrinaire Labour. He was New Labour.
no, he was New Labor.
Yeah. How about Trudeau the Elder? You've spoken kindly of him.
You know what? I used to, but I mean, again, you two lunkheads have a way of poisoning me against
Icons, heroes.
against things. Well, and I have started doing some digging along the way and paying attention, stuff like that. So I'm seeing the Laurentian side of things and getting. It's taken me 40 years, but to start to understand, and now I guess I'm kind of daring to compare what the NEP did back then compared to policies nowadays, which piss me off.
On that point, I saw in a wee book in Marc Lalonde's memoirs, and I didn't buy it, and I've been kicking myself ever since.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I would have liked to have gotten the NEP from the other side,
Yeah.
and I should have. So yeah, every now and then I kind of keep an eye on to see if I can find it.
Yeah, you know
Check
what? I don't
Amazon?
have the.
What's that?
Have you checked Amazon? You might be
Actually, I should.
able, yeah, you get a
might
used
be-
copy
yeah,
out there,
yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. So anyway, keep going.
I guess the closest I can come to it would be maybe Nelson Mandela. Um, anything South American? No. Anything particularly European? No. I mean, maybe Pope John Paul II.
Can I
yeah,
give you some names
it's
and
your
then you
game,
just
yeah.
give me your kind of like we can do like word association. I'll give you a couple of names and then you give me like the first 5 words that come to you.
Okay.
Delton McGuinty.
Don't know. He was Ontario, wasn't
Yeah, premier. He was a Liberal Premier of Ontario. So we'll do it as a combination because I kind of come together. Delton McGuinty, Catherine Wynne.
he? Ontario, don't care.
Wow. Okay. Rachel Notley.
Okay, there's one. Actually, she's underrated. She's unfairly maligned.
What do you like about it? What would you say if she was going to hang her hat on 3 policies? What would you name?
I liked the fact that she actually, passed the legislation that said we are giving ourselves the option to cut off oil supplies to British Columbia. I thought that was an entirely Albertan thing to do. And I think that speaks a lot to the difference between, because that was an Alberta NDP government saying "fuck you" to a BC NDP government, and that to me spoke volumes. So if anyone wants to look at what it wants to criticize her and say, "Oh, she wasn't for Alberta," I'll point to that.
Paul Martin.
I'll just
Pass. No, you don't get to pass. Tell me something.
No,
He's not a Martin fan.
Doesn't have to be a Martin fan. I just want to. I want to know what you say.
smug, arrogant, Laurentian.
How about that little guy from the Showing Again? The Jean Chrétien.
He was the first example of my distaste for a guy who would respond to public opinion for the sake of it. But if there was nothing to respond to, he wouldn't do anything. Right? That was the first inkling I had that politics were going that way.
What do you mean? I'm not following you.
I think it was when he was there was the protest going on. He grabbed that protester by the throat.
Yes, I do remember. Yes,
Right.
yes.
And there was a great big outrage, and he apologized for it.
Right.
Right.
And also the pepper. The pepper, it's on my plate. I like it with the food. When some guy pepper sprayed during the APEC affair, yeah.
Yeah, so he would if there was public outrage about something, he would respond to it to appease the public outrage.
Mm-hmm.
But if there wasn't, he wasn't doing anything about it. So there were things he could have been done, but if people didn't give enough of a shit to, kind of raise an objection to it, he wasn't doing anything. Again, yeah, I didn't like that about him.
Keir Starmer.
I don't know enough. I really don't know enough. I'm waiting to see what happens in the UK. But again, anything post, anything since 2015, it's politics. That's an entirely different playbook, right? It's just in the social media age, politics are so messed up.
You haven't, like, in other words, you're saying you haven't really been tracking any UK politics since 2015?
Well, I have. It's. I've seen, so he's committed Britain to Ukraine. And aside from that, there were all the riots going on for a while there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen enough of his policies to comment. Right.
I'd
say Britain's in a bad way.
Would you kind of say the same thing if I threw David Albanese at you?
I don't even know who that is.
Prime Minister of Australia.
I don't. Australia, who cares?
Wow.
Australians.
Holy. Holy.
Well, obviously, Australians are going to care. I don't care about Australia.
Holy shit. That's cold, brother. Okay, and one more.
To our Australian listeners, I apologize.
One more, and then I promise I will leave you alone.
Okay.
Oh, crap. Okay, no, I can't do this. I was going to say Scott Moe, but no. We're saying the guys on the left. Oh, hell. Current Premier of Manitoba.
Wab Canoe?
Yes, thank you. Wab Canoe.
Don't know enough. And again, Manitoba.
Wow! Oh my God!
Like I said,
Trent! I'm aghast. I thought
Okay.
you'd love this guy.
my scope for politics, right, is whatever catches my attention and whatever's sitting down with you two, right? That's it.
That's it.
Right?
Now, I would have thought Rob Canoe would have caught your attention, though. Pretty dynamic dude. He's making waves out there in Manitoba.
No, I mean Alberta.
Yeah.
And what impacts Alberta? So that's federal, and that also impacts Canada, which I sort of give a shit about. British Columbia, because that has an impact on Alberta.
Okay. But that's it. Okay, then one more, and then I promise I'll leave you alone.
No, you already
You already
said that
broke your
once.
promise.
Well, because he didn't know anything about Wab Canoe. I got to get one that he knows somebody about. Naheed Nenshi.
Okay. Jury's out. I think he was interesting as mayor of Calgary.
Interesting how?
We've discussed
Define
this before.
interesting.
Hang on. Did I just mute myself?
Nope,
Radio check.
nope, you're good.
still there.
You're good. Define interesting.
Hang on. I pressed down on.
Oh, now you
Now
did
you've
it.
muted yourself.
Now you've muted yourself.
Oh, wait
No,
out.
we got you
Now,
back.
now you're back.
Yeah, we got you.
Stop pushing buttons.
How's that?
The old man with the tech.
Am I back?
Phone.
How about now?
Oh, we got you. We got you.
Oh, okay, my bad. I pressed down on this thing on the table
Yeah.
here.
Define interesting.
I don't know. All I can remember, he was in the news, and he seemed to be kind of responsibly progressive in a way that the mayor of Edmonton was not.
Iverson was pretty progressive.
Iverson, and then
Iverson is the guy to blame for all these stupid bike lanes.
I know.
who
That's
was-
why I'm saying Iverson was worse. That's why I'm saying. Then she, since
Oh,
me, not
I
Oh,
see.
you say
what you mean.
Iverson was too
Gotcha,
progressive. Okay.
gotcha. Oh, and then before Iverson was the guy who looks like Gollum,
Oh, Mandel.
Mandel, and then before Mandel was Reimer, or is there too big a gap in there?
No, I think you're right.
No, it
'Cause
might have
Mandel
been
was
Reimer.
mayor for quite a while.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway,
Mandel. I liked Mandel on a couple of things because he called out people for using knives, and he called out because some I think it was on White Ave that some of the shop owners were complaining that the city trash cans on the streets weren't getting emptied quickly enough. And he was kind of like, would it kill you to go out there and empty it yourself? I get it, we're failing, but like, right? So I thought, okay, those are pretty good things. And then
that sounds really conservative.
Not
but
the
then
not the.
there was one
For
day
Trent?
when
Oh,
Trent,
What?
you're sounding bluer every day, man. You need to get a grip on that.
I remember that being in the news that Stephen Mandel got caught up in a traffic jam or traffic delays due to construction on the, what was it, the Canal Bridge?
Okay.
And this was like 2 years into, 2 or 3 years into a project that was supposed to be 1 year,
Yeah.
right? And I thought, holy shit, dude, it's taking you this long to
Yeah.
experience what we've been experiencing.
Yeah.
All that. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Fuck you, right? I got no time for that.
So what are you
So-
hoping for from Nenshi?
I don't know. Like I said, I feel that Notley did a good job. She should. I mean, the Notleys have the street cred in this province politically that the Trudeaus do federally. Her dad was well respected. I felt that the party, I said it when they got elected. You guys only benefited because the Wildrose split the vote. So do not for for a second think that this is a mandate for the NDP. This was a mandate against the Conservatives because people had finally had enough of them, and they said a couple of boneheaded things like look in the mirror, which I think Alberta's could do with, right? But politically, the Tories suffered because of it. And, given all that, I felt like Rachel got a bad deal. Like the party shouldn't have been looking to replace her. Frankly, she was the only one who took them to a mandate that they might not otherwise have had, and she ruled competently. That being said, now that Nenshi's in there, he's probably the best choice to replace her. Not that I think they had a ton of options. So I think there's maybe some
I
potential.
would agree with you on that. He's probably the more mainstream, like Janice Irwin, for example. Can you imagine her trying to lead? Like she would get votes in Edmonton, but there's no way she would carry like Calgary or Lethbridge. She's just too crazy.
I mean, and we're already seeing, we're seeing it when they got into power, like some of that fractiousness that exists on the left, right?
Yeah,
There was
like you
at
could
least-
kind of see that in the split between the Hoffman camp and like she was more like the old school, the old guard that had mucked it out, like the old fighters who had come up from the trenches with Notley. And there was, I think, I sensed a bit of resentment with the Nenshi guys who were kind of seen as wagon jumpers and carpetbaggers.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see that. But I mean, what I was also seeing, like when they got into power, was, you had some of the backbenchers that were complaining about bullying. I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go, right?
Mm.
Like everyone needs their safe spaces now, even in caucus. So,
Well, yeah, I can. In retrospect, as you say, in 2016, that seemed a little like, oh my God, grow up. But in
yeah.
2025, I look at it and say, well, that's par for the course.
Oh my
Given
God, I
that,
hate the
given that
numbers.
demographic, that's what we should have expected.
I
And they
hate the
were a
numbers that you just
very,
threw at me.
they were
Holy
very,
shit.
very young. Like
Oh yeah.
that caucus, that first NDP caucus was, I think, a full quarter of them had never had a full-time job. Like that was their first full-time job. They had been students up to that point, and they had full-time jobs. You know what I mean? But like they had never had any kind of actual career experience. They didn't have any prior careers. It's not like they went from say, well, I was an accountant and I worked at this firm and now I'm an MLA. A full 25% of that caucus was they'd been a barista, or they worked at a department store. Like they had like student type jobs.
Oh,
And then
I
it got
and
launched into cabinet. And that definitely, you
yes.
could see that I think that did hamstring the New Democrats over and above how their policies hamstrung them, or their ideological bent hamstrung them. Just that they didn't have the same kind of depth in their bench the way, say, the New British Columbia New Democrats did.
Well, that brings to mind, I'm going to speak for someone else. I'm not going to name the name, but it was someone who was there to experience it. And I reached out to be as part of this episode just before we started and was unavailable. But he was saying that when Obama came in to office after he was first elected, and all the people he had working for him,
2008?
anyone who had to deal with them at the time called them the T-shirt folders.
Oh, yeah. Because it was the same kind of thing.
It's same kind of thing, right? They had no experience whatsoever,
Right.
except to have been,
Students. Like they were
on
just
the camp.
recent graduates out of bachelor and graduate programs.
Yeah, and they'd all been part of the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been out knocking on doors and stuff like that, but they had absolutely no administrative experience. No,
Yeah, they've all been in like their full-time jobs have been like retail and stuff like that.
Like they weren't careers, they were jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, that was an interesting exercise. I am going to have to call it because I've got some work I actually have to get done this afternoon.
I think there's a natural endpoint. So.
And we'll just end the episode by saying the words Donald Trump because that's how it was supposed to be presented.
We mentioned him once or twice.
We covered him. We
didn't talk about Israel,
Actually,
but
all right, something for next time.
I guess.
Okay.
All right, thanks, guys.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.